In this video, I'm going to discuss some ideas how to adjust labor in Red Rhino. So first of all, I've already created an estimate here, and you see the name of the estimate. Let me just blow this up a little bit. The name of the estimate right here is Labor Factoring for Conduit and Wire. Okay, so that's just the name of the estimate. I just picked that because that's what this is about. But let me show you something. So if I click edit, I already created this estimate, obviously, and you see how the labor unit is set at competitive. So when I click edit on this estimate, I can change this, okay? Now, this is the window that it opens when you create an estimate where you fill in the estimate name. But let me just explain that there's two different settings for Red Rhino labor. There's competitive, which will be the default when you set up an estimate, and there's change order. And you see that I click here and select change order. Okay, now I just want to explain something. As overall, when you select change order labor in an estimate, it's going to spit out, I like that term, it's going to display about 40% more hours than it will with competitive. So again, if you set this at change order, it's going to increase the labor in everything input around 40%. Now I'm going to set it back to competitive and save it, and I'm going to show you a comparison. So I'm going to go into the estimate, and I'm going to use the Conduit Wizard. I'm going to input Conduit, and again, I'm going to show you the competitive labor units. Then I'm going to go back and reset it to change order and show you the difference, so you know. Now, this is something you want to compare on your own, but I want you to know that this setting is here. What do I use change order labor for? I use it for difficult environments. You know what? If I would be estimating projects in a factory or hospital, when it's just not a clear area to work in, I would use change order. And of course, if you're generating change orders, I use change order labor for that. Okay, so let me show you the difference here. Now, let me just let you be with me through this experience of putting the conduit in. Now, for one thing, I'm going to set it up for 3-inch EMT, and I'm going to set this at plus 20, which is the most labor that you can set it at. Now, let me just digress a moment into the conduit application. The conduit application will display different amounts of labor based on basically how high the conduit is off the floor. It'll display the least amount of labor for underground and slab. Normal means walking on the floor with no ladder, so it'll input a little bit more labor for that. Plus 10 is next. It'll input more labor for plus 10 feet. And if you select plus 20, that's the most that Red Rhino will show if you don't do anything else. And I'll show you what I mean by that later. So I'm setting this up for 3-inch basically. I'm going to set it up for 190 feet, one run. Then I'm going to put some feeders in here. I'll show you when I'm done. Okay, now if you'll remember, I set this estimate up for competitive labor, and I'm going to go input 190 feet of 3-inch EMT with 4,500 MCM and one number 2 ground. I set it for 8 foot for wire makeup. This isn't a lesson on the Wizard, mostly about labor is what I'm doing here. And 4 elbows you'll see here, okay? Conduit supports defaults at 8 feet. Okay, so I'm just going to go add this and input it and save it. We'll just take a look at it. Okay, so we see here that the labor displays at 12.13 feet for 3-inch. Okay, now I have to actually go back and reset this for change order and refresh it, and it'll show the labor for 3-inch EMT under change order labor. Okay, not just EMT, but all these items, the labor, again, labor hours down this column is going to change for all of these items, each item, about 40%. Let's go take a look and see. So I'll go make the change. We'll come back. Now, I just want to make a quick observation with you again, item by item here. The EMT 3-inch is about 12 hours. The couplings are about 4 hours per 100, and the set screw connectors are about 15 hours. That's per 100. Okay, so let's compare. And you know what? For your sake, I decided I'm just going to show you step by step what I'm doing here. I just have to take a few steps. I have to go reset this labor for change order, and I have to refresh it. So let me show you. I'm just going to click the back button here, I'm going to click Edit, and that lets me edit or change the labor unit. So I'm going to reset it for change order, and I'll save it. Now I have to do one more step. I have to refresh it. So I'll click the refresh button at the top here and select labor hours. When I do, it displays that it says all items were repriced for in this section. So let me go back to the estimate. No, I'm navigating around a bunch, and I'll just drill down here and we'll see. Now you see before this value was 12 hours, now it's 15. And this value right here is 11 hours. Before it was a lot less. I should have written it down, okay? And 35 hours for couplings and so on. So everything increased roughly 40%. So again, if I'm estimating in a really hostile environment that's not a high production area, or if I'm estimating for change orders, I use the change order labor rate. Now I'm going to go switch this back, but I want to discuss something further with you. And that would be to do with the Conduit Wizard labor factoring. Okay, here I set it back to competitive and refreshed it. It's back to competitive. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you more here. Now I set this up again for 3-inch EMT like it was set before, but I want to explain something so you understand. Look, when you set the conduit application at plus 20, it does not change the labor for pulling conductors or pulling wire. It just changes the labor for installing the EMT. Now let me show you more. Again, I set this up the same way with the same footage as the input we see back here on the screen. But what I'm going to do this time is explain something more. Okay, here's what I want to explain. If you choose to, you can set up how many dollars the program will come up with for material supports and the amount of labor. If you want $5 for supports, you put 5 here, and say half an hour. I'm making this simple, but 0.5 hours for supports. Then you can override what Red Rhino would input. Now, I usually don't use this very occasionally, but I want to show you how it works, because if you play around with it, it might be something you want to use. Okay, so again, you can dictate how much support, material, and labor the program will input for the supports on this run or this conduit you're inputting. Now here's something else I want to get to the point on. You see where down here where it says labor hours adjustment percent. If you want to increase the amount of labor that the program spits out for installing this conduit, then you can factor it here. And here's what I mean. Let's say that you think that this is a really kind of a moderately difficult to high difficult area. You have it set at expose plus 20, but you want to add another 40% here for conduit. Now, if you choose to, you can also add a percentage, and it's going to add that percentage for wire pulling, okay? So if you think it'll be 25% more difficult to pull wires, or you want to add that labor, you can do it for wire 1. You see wire 1 is 500 MCM for wire 2. So again, with regard to labor factoring, you can go in here and input a percentage here, and it'll add that much more percent of labor for these items. Now I'm going to go ahead and input that, and we'll see the results. Okay, so here again on the Conduit Wizard, I added an additional 40% on top of what the labor would be normally. Now let me just minimize this, and I'll just save it, and we'll take a look. Okay, so here we see that I used the plus 20 feet in the Conduit Wizard, but here I added another 40%. Now, it added that for conduit only, not pulling of wire. And I could have changed it for wire if I wanted to. Okay, so that's it for this video. I wanted to show you, first point is that you can set this up for change order, and it'll add about 40% more labor than it does competitive. Now, the other thing is you can use on this Conduit Wizard, you want to make sure and select the conduit application from easy to difficult. And then on top of that, if you want to, you can factor in more labor by putting the percent that you want to add here. Okay, that's it for this video. Hope that helps.